Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's show brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. We're on social media. Follow us at SWGM Podcast on Facebook, SWGM Podcast on Twitter. Throw us a buck on Patreon, patreon.com/SWGM Podcast. We're on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. You can find us on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Savage Worlds GM Podcast, and the same moniker on iTunes, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Nailed it. Here tonight, we're talking about true hindrances, how hindrances play in your game, how they should be used, ways to approach them. And here to discuss it, Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
You did it.
Dave, the Rules Maven Scott.
I promise those old settings are coming back. They'll be available soon.
Huh? Okay. And Dustin, the Savage. Sorry, let me start over. Dave, this is the Rules Maven Scott. Dustin, the Savage Zealot Smith.
Something dark side. Something complete.
So let's talk about hindrances. And if you're watching the show, the live stream, feel free to participate in the chat. We do include the conversations here in the show. So let's talk hindrances. Hindrances are kind of overlooked or nominalized in Savage Worlds. Oh, they're flaws. Oh, they're disadvantages from other systems. There's so much more. They are an integral part of this thing we call a Benny economy. If you want to find ways for your characters to earn bennies and do amazing things, focus on their hindrances. As a GM, give them opportunities to explore their hindrances.
Wait, Jared. I'm supposed to read the players' character sheets?
Yeah, you're kind of supposed to.
Yeah, it's good. That's good to know. That's good to know what hindrances they have.
Like, so if you got a player character who's taken heroic Porsche buck, that is just gold mine for GM. Oh, really? You want to play a heroic character? You do know that heroes are made to suffer. So, look, you're running. You're running to the crime scene. Oh, the criminals. You almost got the villain. Oh, look, there's an old lady trapped in a fire in the building upstairs, screaming for your help.
Well, Jared, my character's a hero. He's not an idiot.
Right, so you're going to let the old lady burn.
You're going to let the old lady burn?
Burn, old lady, burn.
The Savage GM podcast does not endorse the burning of old ladies.
Unless they're witches.
Exactly.
Hate mail to the Savage Zealot.
Yeah, if they're witches, they got to burn.
I actually have to read the hate mail, folks, so...
But, Scott... Chris, how do you know she's a witch?
Well, you put a weight on her, and then you put her underwater, and
if she weighs as much as a duck.
Right, then
she's a witch.
She's a witch.
Well, she turned me into a newt.
Oh, look, she drowned. She must not have been a witch.
I got better, though.
I got better.
Turned you into a newt.
I got better. So, yeah. So... here's the thing too. So let's kind of have that conversation about, first of all, what do you award bennies for at your table? How do you award bennies? If we're going to say hindrances are a key component in the Benny economy, let's kind of have a quick conversation then about the Benny economy and what we mean by that for anybody who is perhaps new to Savage Worlds or doesn't necessarily pay attention to that in their existing Savage Worlds games.
Well, I mean, we talk a lot on this show about like the Pavlovian dog treat thing, the whole idea that you give out bennies every time a player does the type of behavior you want to see at the table, whether that's talking in silly voices or standing on a failure or things of that nature. Those are great. Like, hey, as a GM, if you want to train your players to play the way you're trying to play the game, to teach that style, you can absolutely use bennies for that. But I think a lot of GMs completely forget that the primary dispensation of bennies doesn't come from anything other than, oh, look, you properly role-played one of the hindrances on your sheet, or, oh, look, you have phobia spiders, and a giant spider pops onto the scene. So here's a Benny, because your character's now at -2 for the whole scene, and moving right along. It's one of those things that every time a phobia comes up, it puts a Benny in your hand.
You have phobia old people, but you still go into the trailer park.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And phobias, I think too, we kind of maybe need to have this conversation too. Phobias are open to interpretation. You don't just necessarily look at the literal translation of heroic and go, oh, heroic or mean. Mean does not mean asshole. It means mean. Mean does not mean you pick fights with everybody, although it can mean that. So you kind of need to have that conversation when you're helping your players come up with their hindrances.
A great example of that from something more recent, because I know we always use kind of the same examples. There's a great example in Just Insert Imagination's Wise Guys demo kit that just came out. They actually lay out the actual code La Cosa Nostra followed for Silence and Omerta and all of that. They lay out the full mob code that all of these guys were sworn to uphold, and then they automatically assign Code of Honor, Omerta, and Vow, Serve the Mafia, as hindrances right off the jump, because Code of Honor doesn't just mean, oh, I have to be all chivalrous and live by Victorian honor. No, it can just mean, here's this code I've sworn to live my life by, and if I don't, or if that comes up, I get rewarded with bennies when I fulfill that. If I don't snitch on bitches, I get bennies.
Right. So I know, Chris, you have a specific close endearment to the mean hindrance. Why don't you go ahead?
I do. It's I know I've told it a few times, but first time I ever tried to use Roll20, got some people together, decided I would run the Tomb of Terror, which is the fantasy one shot with all the pre-made characters. One of the characters has mean. Well, I invited some people in, and I needed one more player, so this guy brought in a friend of his named, to be redacted, Weasel. And right off the bat, he takes this character and he just starts shitting on everybody. Like, right off the bat, kind of in character and a little out of character. And his thing, well, I have the mean hindrance. And about 20 minutes into the game, using Roll20, instead of whispering just to one person like I thought I did, I basically said to the whole table, sorry, I didn't know this guy was going to be such an asshole. And one of my friends like, you realize you just said that to everyone? I'm like, yeah, no, I don't care. I was pretty pissed at that point, because he'd already basically killed the game, and he killed the game, in reverence to, I have the mean hindrance, so that means I can be an asshole to everybody in the party, as well as just an asshole in general.
Well, and I mean, that's not just the mean hindrance that does that. That's any player who takes a hindrance too far. Like, I had a player who was playing Doubting Thomas in ETU, and he's like, yeah, I just leave and go back to my dorm because I don't believe that there's ghosts in this room, so why would I spend the night here with everybody looking for them? I'm like, you're completely taking that the wrong direction for role-playing purposes. You should be the one trying to prove to them there's not ghosts through, like, scientific means. And instead, like, nope. I was like, well, dude, if your character goes back to the dorm, I'm not running a doodly-doo, halfway through every scene where I cut to you and have you read something from your book in the dorm. So you might as well pack your stuff up and go home, because I'm not going to run 2 sessions because you decided to biff out on this. And the player, credit where credit's due, the player packed his shit up and went home and didn't complain being left out of the whole session. But yeah, that's when you absolutely let the name of a hindrance go too far, or you've taken that, you've played a very one-dimensional version of what's in the book for that hindrance.
I think that's, I don't think I've heard somebody say it that way before, but I like that one-dimensional. Don't be that one-trick pony. There have some differences in how you play that particular hindrance. I mean, right. you can be mean, and maybe you're mean to certain people, but you're there for your party members. You know,
Right.
we've discussed before. It's like Mean Girls. You know, you're sort of like this, just a snotty person to other people, but you've got your core group of friends who you would do anything for.
Right. Well, and then you have this too. I would say a good literary example of a character who plays the mean hindrance to the hilt and plays it properly would be Ebenezer Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Just self-centered, finds it hard to do things for other people unless there's something in it for him. Doesn't take a compliment well. Has something sour and mean to say to everybody about anything.
Well, I think we've beat mean up quite a bit over the years, and somebody in chats even piping up with Dr. House, because that's our kind of go-to representative of it as well. But I mean, even if we're just going to continue to talk about mean, another way to look at this is that character that in public is crude or crass or constantly, you know, pointing out the flaws of all their compatriots, and then in private is nice to them because they have to uphold the way they look as a haughty member of high society in front of society, but in private, oh, you guys are absolutely my equals, I just can't treat you that way. That could be another way of playing the mean hindrance that, again, allow yourself to step back from what it is and consider, what do you want to role play? And then pick a hindrance that kind of sort of does that thing, and then just tell the GM, this is how I'm going to play this. And I mean, obviously, if the GM is on board with that, they're going to award bennies, and it doesn't matter what's written on your character sheet. You can just write son of a bitch on the character sheet. You don't have to write mean, and that's the way you play the character.
Right.
I think, and Dave, I remember you telling this story before, and it was about the A-Team. And Clint Black actually said, instead of going this whole difficult delusional route, just make it a habit.
Yeah, that was the Murdoch example.
Yeah.
I had put together this big, long chart where you drew a card at the beginning of every session. I had based it off of, I want to say there's a Deadlands version of Aileen where you draw a card to see if your character's going to die during that session. And I had based it kind of on that, this idea that you drew a card, and then I put out, like, if it's these cards, this is the delusion your character is suffering that night, to kind of capture that whole insanity in a bottle thing with Murdoch. And I posted it up for people's opinions, and Clint just kind of cut through the bullshit and went, why not just make it habit minor? Habit minor, so it gives him the -1 charisma penalty, is insane, and let the player come up with something new every week, and whatever they choose, it doesn't matter. They always suffer -1 charisma because they're insane.
Right. To further the A-Team analogy, B.A. Baracus has the mean hindrance.
He also has the phobia hindrance from flying.
Yep.
Or if you wanted to go the reloaded route, he has the old ways. Which I'm amazed that they don't do this in Deadlands games. Like if you have the shaman with the old ways hindrance, and you don't try that classic A-Team method of getting him on the train.
Here, Chief, have some fire water.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you just gave a bunch of groups a great dastardly idea of what they can do to their fellow player characters, though, Dustin.
That's what I'm here for, man. It's inspiration. That's what I do.
Fault, Days.
Days fault.
I would say this too. I mean, I also want to be an advocate for interesting combinations. There's something to be said for interesting combinations, and I'll laud Dave an interesting combo in the hindrance creation part. We're playing a supernatural monster of the week hunters type game a few 6 months ago. Dave goes, okay, my character is a Catholic priest, acolyte. He kind of went to the clergy, so he knows how to do exorcisms and things like that. But he's a pacifist. He has pacifist major, and also bloodthirsty major. And I'm like, whoa, what? He's like, oh yeah, no, he's pacifist to everything except supernatural monsters. And when he sees supernatural monsters, he goes into a blood fugue because he needs to send them back to the hell from whence they came.
The best part is
fury.
The best part is that when I pitched the character, I thought the hard part was going to be selling Jared on letting me have 2 major hindrances instead of a major and 2 minor. Instead, he's like, "Wait, what? Explain how those 2 go together."
And let's talk about that too. So, if you want to allow that for a character, and it makes sense, by all means, let the player do that. They still only get 4 points total, maximum to buy hindrance as a character.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that. It doesn't matter how many hindrances they want. They still only get the 4 points, and they may not. I wanted to bring this up too. I don't know when the best time to bring it up, but I kind of had two thoughts about hindrances, and one kind of going back to what we'd been talking about is when you take those hindrances and you play those hindrances, don't play those hindrances to the detriment of the fun of the table. I think that's important, that you don't take away the fun at the table by playing those hindrances. And the other thing is if you have all these hindrances, in my opinion, and I wanted to throw this out there to you guys to see what your thought is even if I have the major and 2 minor, whatever it is, if it's, I don't know, throw me a hindrance.
Arrogant.
Okay, so arrogant. So am I going to get a Benny every single time I'm arrogant? Or am I going to get a Benny a couple times that I'm arrogant? That's kind of my feeling, is that I'm not going to give a Benny every single time you play your hindrance, because that's part of your character. But if it's at those moments where it really shines, then I'm going to give you a Benny, or I'm going to, I'm going to kind of throw those out periodically. But I'm not going to give you a Benny every time you play one of your 3 hindrances.
So I guess where I would first respond to that is no. Every time someone plays a hindrance, they don't necessarily get a Benny, but it's less tied to the hindrances issue and more tied to it's still your job as a GM to manage the Benny economy. You don't want to be sitting there with 30 Bennies stacked up in front of them because their character took, habit refers to themselves in the third person. And in every conversation they've been able to refer to themselves in the third person. Well, yeah, that's all well and good. They're role-playing the hindrance, but you have to cut them off at some point. And I believe the book is pretty specific that each player should receive about 3 Bennies per session. And I've actually told a player, hey, you're really playing that to the hilt, but this is your last Benny for hindrances tonight. I'm not telling you not to play them. I'm just letting you know, don't expect me to continue to hand them to you. You've kind of hit your limit. So there's that aspect of it, but there is a flip side to this, and I will say this: it doesn't matter how many Bennies have been given out. If I trigger your hindrance and it's a mechanical hindrance, I owe you a Benny.
Sure.
If you take phobia spiders and I put a spider in the scene, as a GM, as soon as I announce it, I should be handing you a Benny for it, because whether you wanted to roleplay that hindrance or not, I've pretty much forced the issue since it's a mechanical hindrance. Now, if it's a roleplay hindrance and I put it in the scene, I'm only going to pay you if you interact with it. Because here's the thing, again, that I see people miss all the time. You cannot make the players play their hindrances. They have to choose to do so. And at the end of the day, the only person who suffers when a player chooses not to play those hindrances is the player for this very issue. They're turning down free Bennies, which let them do all the cool shit in Savage Worlds that you do with Bennies, like soaking wounds or activating high adventure or re-rolling when they rolled that really bad shooting roll and are about to shoot their friend in the back of the head instead of the enemy. I mean, those things are there specifically to help control the game as a player. And if you choose not to roleplay your hindrances, you're basically saying, I only get however many Bennies I get at the beginning of the session, and that's it.
I'm going to say this. My definition, my kind of rule of thumb guidance on that is the same one I'll apply to when we make a roll, dice roll, when it matters. If you're going to play your hindrance, I'm going to give you a Benny for playing your hindrance when it matters. Now, like Dave said, if you've got a quirk hindrance where you say y'all at the end of every sentence. Okay, great. I need you to continue doing that. That's part of your character. I need you to continue to say y'all at the end of a hindrance, but I'm not giving you a Benny every single time you utter the word y'all. And I'm going to say this too. I'm going to say that I'm not necessarily, you can't necessarily force a character to play a Benny. However, you can gently remind them. So I'll give you like an example. You got one gunslinger in a Deadlands campaign who has the arrogant hindrance. He hates to lose to anybody, especially a big boss. His entire group gets surrounded. They're outgunned by banditos. Everybody starts waving a white flag. They hand over their guns and surrender. I'm going to look at that character that has arrogant. I'm going to go, you know, you have a backup piece in your boot that they don't know about. And El Jefe's standing right there. You could shoot that guy right in the head. If you want to go for that, it's worth a Benny. Now, the rest of the team members go, no, don't do that. Holy shit, no. And you can look at the character and go, it's in your character. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm saying that, you know, if you do it, it's worth the Benny.
So I just want to point something out, because arrogant actually is a great one for this, and it goes back to a conversation we were having a minute ago. Don't take the hindrances at face value. Arrogant does not mean your character is arrogant. Arrogant means your character always attacks the biggest bad guy in the bunch first.
Yep.
That's what that hindrance actually mechanically means, is that you're kind of responsible for picking out the biggest one in the pack and going, you, and squaring off with them.
Yeah, you're prisoners on the
chance of winning or not. You're the guy who shoots the dragon.
Right. When a character takes arrogant, what they're saying is, we're all inmates on the prison yard, and I'm walking up to the neo-Nazi skinhead and beating the crap out of him to establish my dominance. I hate to lose. Also, that it'll tell you in the description that character will bait somebody. They will engage somebody in a sword fight, knock the sword out of their hand, then drop the sword out of their own hand and go, come on, pick it up, go ahead. I'll fight you without a sword. I'm that damn good. So you kind of got to look at it like that. But I'm not suggesting that you Benny bait them every time. But if it's very significant to the plot and to what's going on, it's worth saying, hey, you know what? Your character has this hindrance. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think your character would probably not do that, or might possibly do this. And it's worth a Benny if you decide to go for it.
I would even go so far as to say, if you want to go the ultimate route with that, when you call them out on it, do the Jared Gunning and actually offer them a GM Benny, so that you're giving this player the opportunity to screw the whole rest of the party over by getting them into a worse situation. It's that out of the frying pan into the fire moment that you're giving them a choice to do, but you're also going to reduce the number of Bennies sitting in front of the GM, making essentially everyone they face the rest of the night that much less powerful. But I'll be honest, most of the GMs I know don't burn through most of their Bennies, so you're really not risking a lot when you offer up a GM Benny to a player. They have a certain value they see it worth as, but as GMs, I think most of us kind of forget that we have Bennies too.
I'll say this too. I'll let you speak here in just a second. Des, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry, but to a point. And Dave has done this in games. I've done this in games. You can GM Fiat a hindrance and pay the character a Benny. For example, one of your player characters has big mouth, and you're getting ready to pull off this heist. You look at the player character and go, oh yeah, last night you were hanging out at a bar and told everybody at the bar how about you're this big shot plan and what your plan was. Here's a Benny. The cops pull around the corner. They're waiting for you.
Now, to be fair, the big mouth hindrance is kind of unique in that regard. It's like a mechanical hindrance in that the player kind of suffers the effects of having done it, whether they mention it or not. And there's actually some examples in the book that kind of lead you to use it that way. So, when you as the GM should be awarding the Benny when you trigger the hindrance is when they're a mechanical hindrance that have a designed effect. Roleplay hindrances, you really have to be careful.
Go ahead, Justin.
I was going to say, going back to what Chris said earlier, how he said hindrances should really they shouldn't interfere with the fun. I go even further. I think that the hindrances should make it more fun. Like one of the hindrances that I will take with a lot of my characters is loyal. And I was in a Pirates game, and this little old lady robbed one of my crew. Like, she held him up. So my character went and punched this little old lady in the face because he had the loyal hindrance. And everybody ribbed me so hard. And I'm like, look, guys, I've got the loyal hindrance and I've got a smarts of D4. What were you expecting?
Right? The thug punched the little old lady. I mean, go figure.
I want to kind of talk about the Joni Connors here, the Joni Connor Ford Fairlane, the Many Savage Worlds podcast.
That's two separate comments. Joni Connor just said Ford Fairlane.
Oh, okay.
I think it has meaning or something.
Yeah. The Many Savage Worlds podcast. What do you think about elderly in conjunction with bad eyes and hard of hearing? Include the subsequent hindrances just for RP? No, absolutely not. They're mechanical hindrances. Hard of hearing and bad eyes are mechanical hindrances. Absolutely bring them into play if you want to double down on the. Listen, I'm playing a decrepit old dude. Huh?
Right. And that's a, to me, if that's a player choice, then to me they're saying I want to play this type of character, and I'm okay with those mechanical aspects of the hindrances that are going to come into play and make me not be able to see or hear anything, because I put it on my character sheet. That's kind of what I want to play.
I think there's two aspects to that, and one is what Chris just talked about. It's this idea that when a player puts a hindrance on their character sheet, they're telling you what they want you to set up in front of them. It's like your son telling you they want to practice t-ball, and they've got the tee out and they expect you to set the ball on it for them so that they can swing the bat. They've already kind of set it up for you. It's really just your job to interact with it and facilitate this to be a fun game. The flip side of this is kind of what Jared was talking about a moment ago and what ties into this, and the whole not letting things play to the detriment. This is absolutely where it's your job as a GM to say, well, wait a minute, let's have a conversation here. Is everybody okay with this person playing a blind character? Because that's going to have ramifications on the rest of the party. And I think there's an aspect there where it's not my job as the GM to say you can't take a hindrance, but it's absolutely my job to let the group decide when a hindrance is going to lead to less fun at the table. And a great example of this would be you decide you're playing, a 1970s based game, and you've decided you're going to play an Archie Bunker racist, and you put mean down on the character sheet, and then you write next to it racist. And three of the players at the table go, I have no interest in playing with or about racism. It is absolutely my job to protect the gameplay at the table and say that can't happen, because other players are going to have their fun impacted by it. And I'm using a very extreme example so that there's not a question about it, but it's your job as a GM to always look at the hindrances that are being suggested, character creation, and any time thereafter that where a character ends up with a hindrance, and make sure they fit with the fun of the group.
I would agree, and I would also say even if you've had that conversation, everybody signs off, you really want to spotlight it to really affect the person who's chosen it. So I'll just give a quick example from a dead end game. One of our patrons, Ruben Riviera, played a illegal alien in the zombie apocalypse in LA who had started a food truck business and was illiterate. Smart guy, but just illiterate. Didn't speak English very well and couldn't read or write at all. So in that game, I set that character up to wander out into the woods with somebody who was suicidal to scavenge a home where she knew there was a prescription bottle of sleeping pills, for the sheer point of her committing suicide with him there. and knowing that he would not be able to read the prescription bottle, but the player would put together 2 and 2 and figure out what had happened. And it was like, yeah, you go into the bathroom, you guys are in this house, she disappears for a while. You see her coming out of the bathroom, she looks a little off. You ask her if she's okay. She says, yeah, I'm fine, and everything's fine. And then you see this big, like, amber bottle with a label on it. It's obviously medicine, and it's sitting in the trash can, and it's empty. And the player goes, oh, God, no. She just overdosed. I went, yeah, but your character can't read, so he has no idea what that even says. So you're oblivious to the fact that the person you're walking with is a half hour away or less from dying and reanimating as a zombie in the middle of the woods. That brought the full weight of that hindrance on the character who chose it, instead of having it spread out among the group. So I would say even when a character chooses something like that, really try to focus that hindrance on them. He got a Benny the second she died, but
to be fair, in an earlier scene, that same character was the one that was responsible for reading the map and led us to the wrong city, which put us in a different, interesting situation. But it didn't lead to like, oh, well, here's an extra 15 minutes of narrative that's kind of boring that talks about us having to circle back and go back. No, we suddenly found ourselves in a different city with all kinds of stuff we had to deal with, and the things that go with having gone, 50 miles in the wrong direction when you have limited gas. Like that hindrance had bite to it, but it didn't take away the fun of the game. It reinforced the survival aspect of that session. So you can do this in any setting by making sure it's applicable to what the players came to play. So if one of the players maybe takes the poverty hindrance, you can reinforce that by putting them in a situation where, oh look, it's a Beasts and Barbarians game where they go carousing between sessions, and you can talk about how this character can't carouse, and therefore somebody else has to pay their way. And that's putting that hindrance that the player took on another player, but it's to feed the narrative of what's going on, and the way their party always says they go out and carouse together. Well, okay, who's playing for Dustin, who took the poverty hindrance?
Right. Or Dustin gets a large amount of treasure and treats everybody to, drinks are on me, because he can't manage money. He can't hold on to money.
Oh yeah, the poverty hindrance also says that they spend their money twice as fast, so they cut all rewards in half. Well, he just spent it all at the local bar buying drinks for literally everyone in town.
Either that, or he had a nervous breakdown on the beach, and now he gives all of his money to the church.
To stop the sea people.
You have to stop the Atlanteans. You can't let the fish people take over.
So I knew Ruben asked a question, but I want to come to that one here in a few minutes. I want to jump to Art's question first.
Sure. Go ahead, read it.
Is there a suggestion on what level of hindrance be given as a result of some traumatic or mind-breaking event besides GM discretion? And then he goes on in chat to his example is player character sees someone get eaten by a werewolf for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my first blush response to this is I would kind of weigh how important the victim of the thing they're seeing was to them. If this is their daughter, that's a mind-crippling event. If it's a random NPC they've never met before, it's a fear check. It's not even really, going to lead to, a long-term psychological hindrance that the character is going to carry. So that, to me, that's the first step of this, is determining when does this lead to a hindrance. And secondarily, if you're using the fear and fright rules, it has some hard and fast rules as to you rolled this, you get a hindrance.
Right, that's what I was about to say. Is that's when I don't think I've ever said to a player character, you now have this hindrance because of X. But it's been, okay, you make the fear check. Okay, now the fear check says you have a major phobia. What and I sometimes try to turn that to the player. I mean, I have veto power, but I'll say, so what is this phobia now? X just happened to you, and now you have a major phobia. what is it?
Full moon. If it's a werewolf attack,
right? It could be, and you want it to be something. In my opinion, something that is going to come into play. I mean, not so much as if it's not one of your ones you got points for, but you're still going to want it to come into play. That's something we haven't talked about yet. I don't know when you want to talk about that, but
how would now be a good time?
Having hindrances that actually are going to come into play, because I don't remember who it was on the panel, but at one point I think that the mention was somebody took like a quirk hindrance and said, "I'm allergic to strawberries."
Oh, Jib had that one.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, when is that? You know that's never going to come into play. So you're just being a little munchkin and trying because you just want the points, but you don't want to have anything happen with that. So you're trying, as you said, Dave, you're trying to bypass a hindrance that way by picking something that's just ridiculous. That's never going to come into play.
And then you're never going to get bennies for it. So here's the thing. Yeah, and this is kind of what we're talking about today, right? That's when you pull the character aside, the player aside. Okay. If you're trying to avoid having a disadvantage for the character, that's fine. You're not even required to buy a hindrance. I want to really point this out, ladies and gentlemen. Hindrances are not required,
right?
In Savage Worlds, they're not required at character creation. If you want to take hindrances for points to spend on edges or attributes or skills, then take hindrances. You're not required to take one major and two minor. You're not required to take any.
Is that transactional nature at character creation the root of the problem? That people see, well, a hindrance must be bad because it gets me extra points to spend? I mean, and I'm just asking.
I think so. I think so. I think it's a holdover from other systems where you have flaws, like from World of Darkness, or disadvantages from GURPS, where it's seen as this, oh, it's a bad thing to have a hindrance, and that's why we're giving you points for it. This is going to come back and screw you in the end. And I think Savage Worlds is such a different style of role-playing game that you have to go, listen, tell me what your character flaw is from a developmental character standpoint. How is this character flawed? What kind of personal challenge do you want to role-play with this character? And let's find a hindrance that fits, that gets you points for it and gives you bennies for it when it comes up. But players are like, well, I'm going to take quirk, allergic to strawberries. Okay, it's not my job as a GM to take that level of ridiculousness and try to sneak strawberries in every time I can, and pigeonhole it in there.
You drive into town. They're having a strawberry festival.
Right.
Only thing in town is strawberries.
Well, hold on, because I'm going to back this trend up and say it is your job as the GM to include the player's hindrances. But that's the thing. The players should pick hindrances they want you to include.
Right.
If that player doesn't want their allergy to strawberries to ever come up,
then don't take the hindrance.
Yeah.
Just as a notation on their character sheet that they're allergic to strawberries, it's not an actual hindrance that they're taking.
That's the thing. I'm sorry, Dave. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I was just going to finish by saying, make sure the hindrances you take are the things you want to have to face as challenges.
I was going to say, Jared, like what you said a minute ago, you don't need the hindrances. I'm thinking what happens is that we get people that they read in and they think that they have to have things. They're thinking in a class system. They're not thinking of Savage Worlds like a toolbox. They're not thinking you pick and choose. They're thinking you have to have these hindrances. I mean, if you want the edges, yeah, but if you just want to build a character and roll some dice, just take a D6. D6 in all your attributes, D6 in notice, fighting and shooting.
Well, I'll say this too. So let's say, for example, I'm building a character. I don't approach personally as a player and as a GM building, if I were to build NPCs, I look at hindrances as innate character flaws, not necessarily a disadvantage mechanic that gets me extra points to spend on edges. So when I look at it, I don't go, what's the least impactful hindrance I can take for this character and still get the points? I don't approach it that way. I approach it from, okay, who is this character? You know what? They're a bit of a Bill Murray, Ghostbusters, Dr. Venkman smartass. That's kind of their character flaw. They're a little full of themselves. They tend to spout off at the wrong moment. Yep, Big Mouth is perfect for this character. Big Mouth is just perfect.
Smart ass.
Yeah. He's got the and then I'm gonna also, but by the same token, I'm also gonna choose edges that reinforce that character as well. Like strong-willed. He's used to thinking quick on his feet, quips, so he's not really affected too much by taunt and intimidation attacks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find those things in the game rules that build out that character, not build or optimize. I think players who take things like quirk, allergic to strawberries are looking for a way to optimize and min-max the character in a way that bypasses the rule system. And what they don't understand is this isn't D&D. This isn't GURPS. This is Savage Worlds, and it's cinematic.
So the Mini Savage Worlds podcast posted in here, without taking the hindrance, it feels like missing out on a free advance. And I get that, but
it kind of is.
My counter to that would be, if that's the way you feel during character creation, you're not looking at what the hindrance does for you in play. You're only looking at what it does for you at character creation. Again, and I go back to something I said at the beginning of the show, as a player, my reason to take hindrances is to fill the pool of bennies I have to work with for the night. If I know that my character might face hardship, I want to make sure I'm role-playing those hindrances as often as possible so that I build a nice stack of bennies to throw in the middle of the table when GM, in this place read Jared Gunning, decides to fuck me over halfway through the session and take away my stuff, have me, surprise attack in my sleep by a thing that kills me with a single hit. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why you want a pile of bennies in front of you. And if you think of hindrances not as this thing I have to take to get points at character creation, but instead as this thing I get to take that gives me special ability earned Benny.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, let's do this too. Hindrances don't have to be crippling to your character either. Let's just do one of the regular pulp culture little thought experiments we do on this show. Indiana Jones. I'm going to create Indiana Jones and Savage Worlds. You could argue on a number of levels what his hindrances are, but you can very easily say phobia snakes.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go way out on a limb here.
You could say, hold on. You could say scar. He has the chin scar. You could say also heroic. Heroic major being the real hook you hang that hat on. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, one of the things I just want to point out, you want a great hindrance to give your character as playing Indiana Jones. Habit major. Has to do something once every 24 hours or he starts to take penalties. Wear his hat.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We constantly see Indy reaching under a closing door or doing something to snatch his hat back, and wear his hat once every 24 hours is habit major. That is how far you can take it to say, right, here's this hindrance that I'm absolutely going to include with the way I play the character and get the points for it, without it being something that's going to be crippling to the character. Habit major is crippling to the character if you just look at the mechanics of it. But wearing a hat's not that hard of a thing to achieve.
Right. And here's the other thing, too. Saying that heroic is a hindrance for Indiana Jones is kind of, if you're going to role play Indiana Jones, don't you want to be doing the heroic car chase on horseback over blah, blah, jumping out of planes? Isn't that what you're going to be doing anyway? Why not take heroic as a hindrance and get bennies for it?
Survive a nuclear blast in a fridge. I mean, come on.
I do believe in Triple Ace games, the pulp rules section that they have, the little free thing you can pick up for pulp, actually takes heroic and loyal out of the pool of hindrances.
Yeah.
It's that should just be assumed by what you're playing. You're playing this pulp-fisted, hammy kind of game. Everyone's heroic, everyone's loyal automatically.
Right. So I mean, I think you have to have that conversation if you got the min maxer who's coming from another system, or the player character or the player who's I'm gonna take dump stat versions of hindrances because I don't want to be anything but awesome.
Seriously?
Okay, don't take hindrances.
Seriously, yes.
Let me award you for your role play. Whenever you role play your character and you do it in a funny voice, or you do it, you make decisions based on how your character would react. Let me award you with bennies. That way you don't need the hindrances. You don't need to take them. You don't have to have them. They're optional.
Going off of that idea of, just through role play, does anybody ever think, what does my character do professionally?
I don't know. It depends.
Indiana Jones. Why doesn't Indiana Jones have the curious hindrance? That's one of the things about the character. He just wants to see what happens. Like, he knows it's a trap. He knows something is going to come rolling around out there, but he has to do it because he's got the curious hindrance.
Yeah, he needs to see how it's trapped, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Figure out the clue. Figure out the mystery.
Yep. Soldiers, code of honor.
Yeah, or loyal. Just being basic loyal. Both. So here's the thing. There's things about your and I agree with what you're putting. I'm digging what you're putting down, Dustin. There are things about your character that you're going to role play that are hindrances that you don't need to codify by taking a hindrance. You're just going to role play that shit.
But taking it as a hindrance, whether you need to or not, is another way to just generate that flow of bennies to yourself and not have to worry about taking something that maybe you don't consider to be a big part of the character. You don't need to add allergic to strawberries to your Indiana Jones character when you can just simply take, the habit or the curiosity or whatnot. There's a lot of ways you can play this. Another great one for Indiana Jones, Code of Honor. Relics belong in museums. Yep. That's his code of honor that he lives by. Therefore, he's going to go out of his way to save the Ark of the Covenant from the Nazis because it belongs in a museum.
Yep. You can also say, too, that he's very big about doing the law-abiding thing, pretty much. The first one who gets to an archaeological dig wins that archaeological dig. That's just the rules of the adventuring archaeologist, right?
And unless you pull out a sword on him, and then he's just going to shoot you.
Right.
Yeah. That obviously that was the worst time to have the trademark weapon edge for that guy.
Yes, very much so.
Before we get to Ruben's question, we got another one from Art that I think is something we should touch on. And Art Fernandez, can you guys talk about using an advance to buy off a hindrance? The first thing I would say is don't do it.
Okay.
And I'm speaking more to the players than to the GMs. I know there's a setting out there somewhere that actually suggested that as a rule. I don't remember which one it is. But just don't do it.
I was going to ask
GM and just ask them if you can change it.
Right. I'm gonna share this. So there's an Atomic Ninja setting rule that Dave and I incorporate in almost all of our settings, and it's called evolution. And this is a setting rule that states once per rank, you can exchange an existing hindrance for one of equal value as long as it's tied to some kind of character development. So in a zombie apocalypse, for example, you may start out with yellow major and go, okay, so I'm afraid of everything because the world has ended as a novice character. Now I get to seasoned and I've seen some shit. I've seen some zombies. It's not quite afraid of everything anymore. So I'm going to trade yellow major for cautious minor and phobia minor zombies because it makes sense in the character arc and development for me not to be afraid of everything in a -4 because I've grown. And you're still putting edges into play that way, allowing the players to do it once per rank. Kinda is more of a character arc thing that's not really written into Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds just sort of assumes that the hindrances you take at character creation are going to be your hindrances throughout the entire life of that character.
And that was my question. I've heard a ton of people talk about that, and yeah, you can use an advance to buy off a hindrance, and that's not rules as written, right? That's nowhere that I've never seen that anywhere.
It's in a published setting somewhere. I've seen it.
Okay.
There's one setting out there that actually allows you to spend an advance to buy off a hindrance. There are also specific hindrances,
but not core.
Even in core, there are specific hindrances, and I can't remember which one it is specifically right now. There's hindrances that can be gotten rid of by certain things happening in the game. You know, it's like your character doesn't remain in poverty if you win the Dragon's Horde kind of a thing. Like,
I guess, or like Young.
Young actually has a very specific cutoff. Like, you no longer have the Young hindrance once you reach a certain point because your character has aged out of it, but you don't get back the things you lost when you took it either. So Young's one of those odd ones like that.
Right. Major Habit also has it in there too. So if you end up going into the coma phase, you wake up, you no longer have the Major Habit. You have to pick something else.
Yeah, because it even says, I mean, looking at Young, it even says if the character should live long enough to mature, the hindrance doesn't have to be bought off.
Yeah.
He's already paid the price for the hindrance. So somewhere it's got to talk about buying off hindrances. And I just...
There may have even been an earlier edition of the game that had that as a core rule. But again, I know I've seen it in print. People aren't just pulling that out of their ass. It does exist out there somewhere. But my suggestion is just don't do it. And the biggest reason why, everyone at your table is sitting there wanting to play this game to have fun. The GM's job is not to enforce the rules. The GM's job is to facilitate everyone having fun. If you come to me and say, hey, I know I took this hindrance on my character sheet. I'm just not enjoying playing anymore. Do you mind if I make a swap here? I'm going to be completely okay with that so long as you can come up with some narrative reason why that character has evolved. And I'm even going to go beyond what Jared suggested with the once per rank. Yeah, that's the rule we kind of put in place more to pass this idea on. But I would say anytime a player comes to you and says, hey, I want to swap out some edges or some hindrances on the character sheet, hear them out, because they are not having fun with the character as it currently exists. Mm-hmm. Does it really damage your game to let them go in and make a shift to I bought this thing with this advance I got. I'm just not enjoying it. It's not working the way I thought. This hindrance is coming up in play more often than I thought it would, or it's not coming up enough, or it feels really hackneyed when it does. Doesn't matter what their reason is. If they're not enjoying it, let them change.
Yeah.
There's no point in making it not fun to play this game.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to go ahead and throw something out there. There are some hindrances that they try to skirt around on, and I don't think you should let people sometimes. For example, there are some sci-fi and post-apocalyptic games that you can get a prosthetic, and people will take the one-armed or they'll take the one-armed hindrance or such as that and claim that, yeah, I have the one-armed hindrance. I'm like, but no, you have a prosthetic. As a GM, I think you really need to have to say, no, I'm not going to allow that because you have the prosthetic. Now, if your prosthetic is damaged and you're looking for parts, and you maybe, like, I know you guys wouldn't, but I'll allow people to buy off hindrances. I will a lot of times. I'll say, but if you can narratively find what you're looking for on your little mini quests, I'll let you buy that hindrance off later when you repair that prosthetic.
Okay, I'm gonna say this: buying off a hindrance. Okay, I've got a little bit of a problem with. I'm gonna buy it off. Okay, so you're going to eliminate an opportunity for you to generate bennies,
right?
Why are you eliminating an opportunity?
And why am I charging for an advance to weaken your character?
Yeah.
I think what a lot of times what they're doing is they're trying to get that little jump at the beginning, at the novice level, and then balance it out later on. Which, if anybody ever plays any of the Weird Ward settings, there's this edge called Grit that just lets you start at seasoned, but then you pay it back over time. It'd be great, hint, if that ended up in Savage Worlds, like Black or in the next edition, because then we'd have a lot of these situations where people wouldn't be buying things off. They'd just be starting, and everybody else would be matching up to them.
So wait, there's these hindrances things that are called, or this edge I remember was called Veteran of the
Old West.
I think you just cut off Old West and just make Veteran, and then you put that into the game and let the people take that. You let them take Grit just as part of core and go with it, but at the same time, again, don't make them spend the advance to get rid of the hindrance. I'm not saying it's wrong to let players swap things out. I'm saying it's wrong to make them spend an advance for that ability.
So, for example, I want to capitalize on what Dave's saying. So let me say this. Okay, so I'm going to spend an advance to buy off the one-arm hindrance and get a robotic prosthetic as the narrative example. Okay? So now as a GM, do I really want to complicate matters with, if it gets damaged, or, if you take a hit to it, now you're back at one arm, and when you spend an advance to get that, when you spend an advance, you're sacrificing an opportunity for an edge, for an attribute increase. Why would I do that instead? No, just take the ambidextrous hindrance, and the one-arm hindrance no longer has a mechanical penalty. Spend the advance on ambidextrous and move on. Rather than, spend the advance to buy off the one-arm. Why? Well, I think there's this idea that there's this mini game to be tinkered with and loopholed through to be more a better character in the game, and do people exploding dice, bennies, make all of that bullshit not matter.
Well,
but go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the other side to this coin is, okay, so your character goes out and gets a replacement arm. Why would they have one-armed at that point? They actually have a second arm.
Right.
Yeah, I might make you suffer the penalties of one-armed if one of your arms gets blown off, but hey, here's a thought. Doesn't that actually happen in the incapacitation rules, where you took, look, I have to roll in the injury chart, and look, the injury I rolled is arm. I gained the one-arm hindrance. I mean, and most of the time it's temporary until the wound is healed. Replacing the fucking arm with a cybernetic arm is healing the wound, folks. I mean, I get the whole idea of a hindrance gets in the way, especially when people see it as a punishment for something that went wrong in game. And this goes back to that question that Art had asked about, what level of hindrance do I give you because you watch somebody get eaten by a werewolf? I get it, but again, if it's taking away from the fun of the game, why are you playing?
Now, if that's part of the fun of the game, is how significant do things screw your character up in a survival horror game, and everybody's on board with that and embraces that tone, then, you see somebody eaten alive by a werewolf? You're messed up for life. You've got a major phobia against anything that reminds you of that situation. You hear a dog bark, you're making a fear check. It's a full moon. I'm not going outside. Not without Silver. It depends on what game you're playing and what impact that really has in the game and the tone of the game. In a cybernetic world where you can buy replacement arms and limbs and eyeballs, who gives two craps about the one arm hindrance?
Well, I was even going to say,
it's not really even a hindrance anymore.
Let us assume for a moment that you're playing Deadlands, and you take Veteran of the Old West. You built your character as a gunslinger, and then you frickin' roll on the chart, and you come up one-armed. You've lost a limb, and look, we roll, and it's your main hand. So your gunslinger, who's this excellent shot with a pistol, just lost their gun hand. You've never played the game. The character is still in the character creation stage. You know what you do? You go, I'm going to take weird science and the bolt power, and my mechanism is a cybernetic arm that I draw a pistol with to replace that missing limb. Now you've just taken this thing that happened to you from a mechanic in the game and turned it into a benefit to your character that fits the tone of the game you're playing in, and it also fits the character you had already built. This gave you an opportunity to have that character grow and blossom in a different way, and it's something that happened to you mechanically through the game. It's not necessarily something you chose. So even those hindrances that get applied to you that were out of your control, absolutely you can still play your character your way by being a little creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now let's talk about this. Let's talk about GM applied hindrances real quick. Hey, congratulations. You get away from the bank heist. Only problem is you failed to take out the cameras. And now the FBI and state and local police have photos of you robbing the bank. Looks like congratulations, boys and girls. You just narratively applied yourself the wanted hindrance. Now, wait a minute. Do you get points for it? Nope. Am I going to give you a Benny when the law enforcement shows up? Yeah, probably. Because it's a hindrance. And go, hey, guess what? You've been made. Here's your Benny. The cops are standing outside with bullhorns surrounding your hotel room, telling you to come out with your arms up. What do?
I'm going to go, damn, we're in a tight spot. Repeatedly the entire scene while I'm applying pomade and a hairnet.
Yep. I'm going to explain to the Americans why this is a bad thing.
Yeah, we're going to sneak out the back, put on fake beards, and then dance on the old Opry stage and sing I Am a Man of Constant Sorrow, and then sneak out of town. Absolutely fantastic. Give me we're going to run this as a social conflict with perform. Just give me spirit rolls for that. Awesome.
And Olaf talked to the governor, and the wanted hindrance was removed, but the corrupt sheriff doesn't care.
Right.
His name is Buford T. Justice.
I mean, you want to talk about a role-playing sheriff. The GM had to pull that name out of his ass. Buford T. Justice?
So I mean, and also too, I think there's also this preconceived notion that players are going to just dig in against somebody having a hindrance that affects them negatively or doesn't allow them or doesn't have a positive outcome. And it's not been my experience with anybody we've played with in one-shot games where somebody has the big mouth hindrance and they're trying to sneak out of a nursing home and they pass the front desk and that person just the player goes, I throw myself against the desk and go, we're planning on sneaking out. I'm sorry. I didn't think we're going to be able to do it. No, we're going to get caught. He looked at me the wrong way. The other players at the table don't go, God damn you. How dare you? They tend to go, now that's funny. Mm-hmm. That's funny. And he's doing it because he has that hindrance. That's who his character is. And we have to deal with it. And it's interesting. It causes a new interesting wrinkle. So now it's not like, oh, God, we're screwed. And now we're going to a hit point attrition combat that's going to last 8 hours. And the ogre is going to eat our brains. No. Let me try to persuade the orderly that he's not taking his meds. He's not quite right. And you can absolutely do that in Savage Worlds. So you can react to that.
So bringing it full circle back to Ruben's question from the top of the show. When you were making the example of my character that took Bloodthirsty and Pacifist, mm-hmm. He wants to know, going with Dave's example to the podcast, what is the oddest hindrance combination you've either utilized, seen, or thought of?
Ooh.
I do not have the memory capacity to remember that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've played an awful lot of Savage Worlds over the years. It would be difficult for me to think of all the ones that have come up, though probably one of the most interesting was a character who was playing a cook on a pirate crew. And he had, what was it? Code of Honor, must use everything, and Outsider as his two hindrances. And so he decided his character
I don't know if I've seen this played, but I'd like to see it played. I'd like to see a combination of Greedy, Major, and Vow of Charity, where I will absolutely kill people to give gold to give to the church, because that's what my God, that's what my deity wants.
It's the paladin slaughtering everyone and taking their stuff directly to the church.
Okay. How about this one? Cautious and overconfident.
That is an actual that actually manifests itself in the real world. Like, people with narcissistic personality disorder tend to have very low opinions of themselves, and they're overcompensating. So
right. So I'm always cautious when I'm going into a room, or I'm in the dungeon. I'm really cautious. But when I get into that, when I finally make it into the room, I'm like, oh man, I can take these guys. I don't know what I was so worried about.
Yeah. It's that I planned 3 times to rush into the room and then immediately charge.
Right, and then the plan goes out the window. I think that'd be a fun combo.
I don't know, man. I've had some fun ones. Of course, one of the most fun ones that I've had is where I took Death Wish and Heroic together, and I was playing Ace Rimmer, so it had to be that way. And the other one was, honest to goodness, Dave, Jared, you know who I'm going to talk about. I had a character in the Pirates game who was delusional and believed that the Atlanteans had taken over the British Empire and were going to take over the world. And it became like this major plot point for my character. And the saddest thing of all is my character was made captain to prevent the Atlanteans from taking over the ship.
I think another interesting combo would be delusional. I think I'm a vampire, and then Habit Major must drink blood.
I was gonna say delusional. This person's my friend, and enemy major for whoever that person was.
Right.
You're constantly letting your guard down to the guy who's out to destroy you.
I would say that should be the person you're in the relationship with. Like that, like your girlfriend is your major enemy, and you're just delusional.
Right. Make sure your girlfriend's not in the house when you listen to this podcast.
Crazy ex-girlfriend.
I'm saying take the noble edge, then take the delusional, she's in love with me, and the enemy major. And you've got it writes itself, people. Come on.
Yeah, it's really hard to say what interesting combos are going to be, because you can kind of play with some of the combos and come up with some very interesting combinations. When it really shines is when you're really dialing it into the tone of the game and coming up with a unique character. I mean, so Dave, in your ETU game, Brody, that character. Did I take like Val, what would Chuck Norris do, or did I just announce, nope, this is just what he does?
I think you played it more as a code of honor.
Yeah.
I don't think it was Val, I think it was code of honor, but yeah, you absolutely took that as an hindrance. And it was this constant, like, the character actually stops in the middle of the scene to go, well, what would Walker do in this situation?
Well, yeah, like I narrated,
do something ridiculous.
I narrated too that he had put in the abbreviations, like tattooed the abbreviations for what would Chuck Norris do across his knuckles on both hands, and then would just turn them up in his fist towards his face and go, "What would Chuck Norris do?" And then he would do that, literally, do that. And that was a fun character to play because it did require a lot of thought, really, to play the character. It's like, well, what would Chuck Norris do? Well, Chuck Norris is a badass karate champion and a hero of the American West. Oh, that makes the decision easy. We drive the F-150 down the basement into the frat house where the ritual is taking place. He jumps out of the car, halfway down the stairs, shoulder rolls, comes out with 2 pistols, and blows the gas tank. Because that's what Chuck Norris would do.
I think Chuck Norris would just roundhouse kick them out of time and space.
Yeah, well, that too. Or his beard might walk up and destroy the avatar of Cthulhu. The servitors of Cthulhu. Just his beard would just punch him.
Yeah.
I think delusional is one of the most overlooked, really overlooked hindrances because it really leaves things wide open. Like, the government eavesdrops on our thoughts. So you have to wear a tinfoil hat to keep the government from reading your thoughts. I mean, things like that. Or I talk to dogs. I can talk to dogs. Or I'm haunted by the ghost of my ex-lover, and she shows up and tells me what to do. Those are interesting role-playing hooks because right in the middle of the session you can go, oh, well, we're under stress, right? Okay, so we're being held hostage in a bank robbery. My ghost appears, and I start having a conversation, a one-sided conversation in the middle of it with this person who's not there. And the robbers tell me to sit down and shut up. And I'm going, excuse me, hold on one second. I'm having a conversation here. No, I understand that. What? Well, no, they've got guns. No, I'm not making a value judgment. What? I mean, you could really role play that out. There's a lot of role play depth in playing delusional that I don't think
people
careful will take care for it.
Talking to dogs, though, because they tell you to go out and shoot people in cars.
Not always.
Not always. The minister will like that, Davey.
What they might be trying to tell you to do is, how to take care of your own personal hygiene and then try to give you instructions on how to do it. And then you're caught trying to duplicate that behavior. That could be bad.
The best version I can think of from popular culture of the delusional hindrance, the way I would love to see a player play it, is the Irishman who joins with William Wallace in Braveheart, who is always turning and having a conversation with God because an Irishman must talk to God to be talking to an equal.
Yep. And so, like that character, so delusional talks to God, and then what? Val keep Wallace alive.
Mm-hmm. The Almighty said he could get me out of here. But
you're fucked.
And then he laughs like a crazy person.
Oh. Well, see, that's the thing. Like we keep talking about like the opposing ones that are great combos. No. You really want to take some great combos? Take the ones that reinforce each other and just become this feedback loop of constant sorrow of you playing the frickin' hindrances.
Yeah.
Val, I must hunt down the undead. Phobia, the undead.
This is my quest. Only then, once I have slain them all, can I drop this witty British accent.
Just looking to see if there's other questions, but
yeah, same here. I'm just taking a real quick look at the chat, seeing if we've not handled anything else. I mean, I think the overall message of tonight's show is don't look at hindrances as bad things. Embrace them. They're part of character role playing, part of character flaw. They're bending generators. They're opportunities for interesting story.
We've talked about before that like the moments that we're all going to remember from the game aren't the big successes. It's the failures. The other thing you're going to remember is when somebody played their hindrance to the hilt. And a great example of this in a recent game in our Friday night group, we had a character who took pacifist and who actually reached over and grabbed the gun while somebody else was shooting and forced them off target. which cost the party a bunch of stuff. And that still gets talked about weeks later as this great moment, despite the fact that really it kind of screwed the group because this player was so dedicated to role playing that hindrance that they played it to the detriment of the group as a whole. And I mean, those are the moments that can be absolutely great. But again, back to Chris's point earlier, make sure it doesn't take away from the fun. Something that happens that's not for the betterment of the party does not necessarily mean it's not for the fun of the players.
Yes, right. I agree.
All right. I want to wrap up tonight's conversation real quick about the heroic hindrance, because I want to talk about that one, because I see it all the time. I see a lot of GM frustration with, well, wait a minute. My player took the heroic hindrance and they won't do anything heroic. Whenever I give them the opportunity to get a Benny for that hindrance, oh, sir, please help us. Our village is being plagued by a dragon. Nope. I may be heroic, but I'm not an idiot. I may be heroic, but I'm not suicidal. Let's talk about that. How do
You're not heroic then.
So
a hero is selfless.
A hero would, I feel like a hero would be more trying to help people get out of the village than actually fight the dragon, Like, you don't have to. So there's acts of bravery and then there's acts of heroism. And sometimes in an act of heroism, it's a matter of rescuing, not conquering.
Has everyone here seen The Hitman's Bodyguard?
No.
No, yeah. I refuse. I'm not going to do it. I can't.
I don't even know what it is.
Ryan Reynolds is spectacular in that movie. I'll just say that.
I believe it.
Well, not to give away too much of the plot, the main character in this show is a bodyguard. And they actually point out at one point he's never put himself in a position where he ever has to do the bodyguard dive, where you dive in front of the client and save them from a bullet. And then that moment comes up later on in the show, but the person he has to do the bodyguard dive for is someone he hates. Like, with the passion of 1,000 suns, this person's destroyed his life, taken everything away from him, and he is put in a situation where his code of ethics and his heroism, he has to kind of do the bodyguard dive and stop this guy from getting killed. And that is a great example of heroic. If you're not wanting to play that, it shouldn't be on the character sheet. It literally means, yes, you will dive in front of oncoming traffic to push the little old lady out of the way. And almost every time that it's put in front of you, it doesn't necessarily have to end in your death. In fact, I think that the GM is taking it too far. If every act of heroism is life-threatening to the hero, guaranteed. Right. But at the same time, if someone has a hindrance on their character sheet that they never play, whether it's heroic, whether it's anything else, curious, you're playing in the zombie apocalypse, and the GM puts you in a house where someone says they're working on the cure in a lab in the basement, and you're a medical doctor with the curious hindrance, and you don't go in the basement. After that session, I'm going to be asking you why those things are on your character sheet and whether or not you want to change them, because obviously to me that sends the signal you didn't want to engage in that thing you wrote on your character sheet. Again, what you put in that hindrance slot, it tells the GM what to include in the game. If as a GM I keep pitching these slow pitches of your hindrances and you don't swing, I'm going to start asking, hey, what's going on? And maybe we find you a different hindrance. Maybe I find a different way to show that to you. But it's absolutely something that as a GM I should be. These are softballs. I'm throwing over the plate because you told me, hey, this is what I want to see.
Yeah. Well, I think also too, it may just require a conversation going, hey, listen, heroic doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. This could be a character point where you could be mean and heroic as a combination where, okay, you'll rescue cats from trees and let the bad guy get away, but oh God, are you going to bitch about it for days? And you're not going to be the grateful, well, you're welcome, young citizen type hero. You're going to be, here's your goddamn cat. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. You just let the guy who planted a nuclear bomb get away because your cat ran up a tree. Way to go. Way to go, loser. And you might push them down on the ground as you walk away. It doesn't have to mean you're happy about it.
This is Hancock.
Yeah, you might go, listen, I'll save your family from the burning building. What's it worth to you? Are we talking, $100, $300? I'll be happy to do it, but, I have expenses. I mean, it doesn't have to be the classic squared off jaw Superman Boy Scout hero. You could take hero and mean and play the anti-hero cliche.
Back to the whole don't play your hindrances one-dimensional.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to be a hero.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is Jared Savage Daddy Gunning for Dustin, Dave, and Chris saying keep rolling and stay savage.